So in the last video, what we did was we spent some time developing the user interface using our paper and pencil and our ideas. So here's the interface we came up with, and we named everything and showed how everything would look, and we put some notes and stuff like that and who the team would be. But one thing I forgot to show you guys on the flowchart that we did was that I didn't have an exit button. So on my flowchart now, what I have here is an exit button for each one. So you click it, it clears the text box, it sends the message, and then it exits the button. So just make sure you have something like this to make sure that your flowchart is complete. After your flowchart is complete, then we go ahead and go on to Visual Studio. We're going to go ahead and start a new project. So not open, but I'm going to new project, and I'm going to make sure I'm under the Visual Basic tab because that's the technology that we're using. And I'm going to go under Windows, and then from Windows I'm going to go over here to Windows Form, and then I have to name my application. So so whatever you name yours is fine, and make sure that after you do that you decide where you want that to be saved. Whenever you decide where it's going to be saved, as you can see, it's going to be on the desktop. Here's the name, and there's going to be a solutions folder that all this is in. So just be aware that wherever you save it, it's going to make its own folder. And then we click OK. And then our application is started. And remember, right off the bat, this is a working application. So I can just hit Control S, save my work, hit F5 to run this application, and here's my application. Now the first thing I notice here is that I want this one changed here, this title here changed in my application. So that's the first thing I take care of. So I adjust it. I make sure that this window is selected, and I can tell it's selected because these little white adjustment boxes or these highlight points are on the window. And then I go over here to my properties, and then I'm going to go down to my text, and I'm going to change that to or whatever you named yours to be, or whatever you want the user to see up here in the title. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to run it. So I need to test my application to make sure I didn't do anything crazy after I changed something. So it seems to be working pretty good. So I go ahead and close that down. And the next thing that I do normally is I go back to my documentation, and then I go ahead and add what I didn't have that before. So I'm going to go ahead and insert inside of my documentation my title here. So this will be my title, and the title that I had was button click application. So you see what happens a lot of times is that you forget something in your design, and you end up going to work on the application, and you add something, and you kind of forget that you didn't add it in your documentation. So this is always the case where you can go back and forth between adding something here and adding something to your application documentation. And your documentation is alive, meaning it adjusts with the application, but also it should start the application. So don't start your application then go to your documentation. It's always best to start off with your documentation, naming things mentally and on paper, and then going over to your application and then letting it rally back and forth between those two. It has to be dynamic after that point. So now if I look at my documentation, the next thing I need to do is make 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons and 4 labels and a text box. So I just go over here to my buttons, and I'm going to resize this button. And I'm going to do this a little bit, shortcut way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the Control key down, and I'm just going to drag that button. I'm going to hold Control and drag. So now I have my 4 buttons. Now I'm going to need my text. You notice I didn't do anything with these buttons after dragging them. I don't want to do anything to these buttons until I'm ready to start doing it. I'm doing one procedure at a time. Placing the objects, then I start naming the objects. So now that I place those buttons, I'm going to go ahead and go to the text box, and I'm going to add a text box here. And I'm going to want this text box to be perhaps a little bit longer, just for the design. Actually, let me check my design documentation. No, it's not that long. It's just like this. I could change that. I'm going to leave it like this for now, but in my design I have it gray. So I'm going to go ahead in my documentation and select my text box here. And I'm going to go to the background color right here. And I'm going to make that gray. There we go. So now I go ahead and change. Now I'm going to start changing the names to all of this. But before I move forward, I make sure I save it, and then I'm going to run it just to make sure nothing is acting out of the ordinary. All right. So now that I have that, I'm going to now check my documentation, and right here I have place drink. That's supposed to be place drink under the dispenser. Okay. So I'm going to now go here and go to my text property. Not the name property, the text property. Right here. And I'm going to put that as place drink under the dispenser. Now when I do that and I update it, as you can see, it's here. Now you'll see why I like to place things and then go ahead and change the properties, because now that I already found and scrolled through and found this text property, as long as I'm working with something that has a text property and I select it, I'm already there. I don't have to scroll anymore. So now I can just go here and add what I want based off of my documentation. Alright, so now that I have all of this stuff here, I want to go ahead and organize it just a little bit better than this. And I could do this by actually going through the formatting, and we're not going to really talk about that right now. Just organize it or format it best you can. And as you can see, when I'm dragging it, you notice how it snaps to, so it's already some automatic formatting capabilities embedded in the IDE that we're able to use. So once I change those labels, now I want to go ahead and look at the names that I have here for my button. So I go here, and not the text. I want to go to this name right here. So you see this one is named button 1. This one's button 2, button 3, and button 4. And that's why I drag them the way I drag them, to make sure that when I drag them, they were going to correspond to my my sketches. If they didn't, you can easily go ahead and change the name. So you can select this and name this whatever you want. But for right now, we'll leave it at button 1, button 2, and button 3. We're going to select this, and we want to be able to see that that's text box 1, just like what we had named in our IDE, our graphical representation that we did when we were sketching. So now what I want to be able to do is add code inside of here, and the easiest way to do that, because remember we talked before about the code behind, which is over here, code behind here, and instead of me manually typing it, I can go over here and I say the code that I want to add up in here, I'm just going to double click that, and then I'm going to add the code that I want to be in button 1. Now what I can do is just double click all of these to add all the button codes at once, so that way I'm not going back and forth adding that information. Once I do that, because I added code behind, I want to go ahead and run it just to make sure my application still works as I expect it, and it does. Now from there, I'm going to go ahead and start adding information to my button 1. So the reason why we took note of the name of this text box, for instance, if we go here and we look under the name, let's see, right here. We look under this name, we'll see that the name is text box. And the reason why we want to know the name, not necessarily the text, is because this is the name we will be using to access all of these properties for this text box when we're coding behind. The other thing you need to understand about this area here is that it can be organized by it can be categorized or it can be alphabetized. So if I go alphabetized, then everything is alphabetized, obviously, except for this name. It always pushes it up to the top. Okay, so that's one thing to be aware of. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'll go ahead and add my information. So first I say I'm going to call text box 1, and I am going to call, this is text box 1, and the property that I want for text box is the same property I used to change the name up here, and that was the text category here. Because you see, if I add text here, it'll add it inside of my text box. But if I were to do that and I were to run my application, if I were to do that and run my application, it will show up there. And let me fix this really quick, and I'll show you that. I run my application, it's there, but that's not really what I want. I want the text to pop in there when I click the button, right? So basically what I need to do is I need to take note that this is text box number 1. I can see that right there. And I need to take note of the property that I want to have access to, which is the text property. So now I go ahead and I double click here, and I'm going to call text box 1, and I want the text property, that text property right there. So I say text box 1 dot text. That's how I get the text property, and I will this will be called place drink under dispenser. So place drink under dispenser should be step 4. Okay, and this is all I want. I just want the user to know what steps or what step he or she is on. And so then I'm going to say number 2 was press lever. That would have been step 3. No. This will be step 3 or step 2. This will be step 3. Grab a cup, which was 3, would be 1. This will be step 4. Right. So now what's going to happen is when I press my button, this information will go inside of the text box. So I'm going to hit F5. And now let me see. If I were to say, okay, grab a cup. Yep, that's step 1. Drink a beverage. Nope, that was step 4. So I messed up on that. Okay, grab a cup, step 1. Place drink under dispenser. Yes, that's step 2. Press lever, step 3. Drink beverage. That's step 4. Awesome. I won this game. That's cool. Now I want a way for my user to be able to exit my application. Without going here and exiting it. So I'm just going to add one more little thing here. I'm going to add another button here, and I'm going to go here to the text to this button, and I'm going to call this exit. There we go. And I can readjust the alignment. There we go. And I'm going to double click on that. And the easy way to exit your application is to say, me.close. And what that will do is that will close my application when I'm done. So I can select all my stuff, all that seems to work, and when I'm done I can go ahead and exit my application, and that's an easy way to do that. So what did we learn so far? We learned that we can come from our documentation. Well, we should come from our documentation, organize how we want everything to look, label everything, and then we go ahead and make the logic behind how it's all going to work, right? And then if we add anything inside our application that we didn't add in our documentation, we go ahead back to our documentation and add whatever. But so far, our button click happens, the text clears whatever was there, and it adds a text that's underneath the button, and then it exits, which is perfect. And the only thing I would add here that would be different than what I did before would be the exit button, right? So you can go ahead and continue on with that. And let's say just one more thing. Let's say after you click it, right? You only get one chance after this. So after you click it, maybe I want it to disappear. Okay, so let's go look at some attributes of this button. I'm going to select, I have my button selected. I can tell I'm going to go to my properties, and I'm going to go all the way down here to visibility. And I can see right now visibility is true. Okay, so what I can do, knowing that these are the properties, and knowing if I have the property name here, I can access it in code. What I can do is after you press a button, I can say button 1, because that's the name of the button, right? Dot visible equals false. And now I can go ahead and do that on all of my buttons. So I'm just going to change that from button 1 to button 2, button 3, and button 4. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to go, if it works, let's go ahead and press F5. And now I go grab a cup. That's step 1, and my button disappears. Drink beverage? Nope. I don't know what I'm doing. I just now screwed up this whole game. And then I do that, and then press lever. So I'm way off, but I lost the game because look at here. My game is jacked up because in the end, this, in order to finish this game, you have to have this at step 3. Okay? So there we have it. We finished the project from beginning to end. We drew out everything. We did our flowchart, and we completed our application. So I hope this helped everybody out. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. And I'll talk to you guys next time.